Welcome everyone Welcome everyone to Let's Dial Up Accurate GTFS Reporting at NTD and for rider confidence. My name is Al Benedict. I lead the technology tools and also the Community Rides Grant Program here at National RTAP. We can jump right in. I guess I can introduce. I'm joined by Thomas Craig. He's with Washington State DOT. Evan Soroki with Caltrans, Cal ITP. And then Marcy, she's the GTFS technical support here for National RTAP. We'll be kind of handing it off. There you go. Thank you, Evan. We'll be handing off the presentation amongst us. Before we begin, I just wanted to go over the webinar agenda quickly. We introduced the speakers. We have a couple slides about National RTAP. Then Marcy's going to give an overview of GTFS, kind of at a high level, and then also talk about some of the strategies for delivering quality data to the NTD. And then we'll get into the nuts and bolts. And here we'll hear from Thomas, who's going to talk about Washington State DOT and lessons learned with his years of statewide data management. Evan's going to be talking about the California DOT holiday service work that they've done and some of the lessons learned and best practices. And Marcy is going to really get into the nuts and bolts, sort of data maintenance versus data quality, and what are the differences, and how do we really produce high quality data. So, real quick, I just want to go back to that slide. So here, we're hoping this will serve as a resource moving forward. This presentation will be made available along with the recording. So these are all hyperlinked to the specific topics in the presentation. So if you have any questions, this will serve as a resource. We are going to go pretty close to the top of the hour here, but we encourage everyone to use the chat for questions, and we'll be answering them amongst all of us here, the panelists. And then also we have open office hours if we can't get to your questions every Thursday. We also have our conference coming up in December. So we're kind of jumping around here a little bit, but we have our conference in December here. And so encourage everyone to attend that. We'll be talking about GTFS and also many other, really interesting topics related to rural and tribal transit. So real quick, a little bit about, go back to that slide, a little bit about National RTAP. We are a 5311 funded program for the FTA. We provide free training, materials, and technical assistance to rural and tribal transit providers and state RTAP programs. We have a review board made up of state DOT and rural and tribal agency staff. We encourage everyone to visit our website, nationalrtap.org, to learn more. You'll see all our resources and just information that we put out for the industry. And here's a reminder about our conference coming up in December in Austin. So here, resources, I'll go over those quickly because we do have a packed agenda here. We offer trainings from e-learning modules to manuals, videos, best practice guides, and different other information resources like toolkits, topic guides, technology tools. We're here talking about GTFS. We also have a number of other tools from procurement to cost allocation to building websites. RideSheet is our newest tool that we've been supporting, a scheduling and reporting platform for small scale ERT services. And peer networking, we have, in addition to the conference coming up, we have peer networking opportunities throughout the year, webinars, conferences, roundtables, online forums. And we're here, assistants, we're here to help. If you have any questions, please send us an email or call. Someone will pick up the phone. Next slide. Oh, and just a reminder to use the chat. Between us, the panelists will be answering those questions the best we can during the webinar. We'll have a little bit of time at the end for questions, but if not, and we'll review this at the end, we have a lot of other opportunities to make sure we get your questions answered and to continue to engage with us. So I think with that, we have another poll. So who do you contact with your GTF issues? Let me launch that poll. I'm gonna end this one. Here we go. So so if you're working and you encounter a GTF issue, where do you go to get support? So state DOT or national RTAP, GTFS vendor, CCAM or CTAA. Figure it out yourself or not sure. And we'll just take a minute here. But again, these polls really help us understand where you're coming from and what your needs are. All right, well, let me end looks like we have a pretty good response. So 10 more seconds and then I'll end it. Great. And I'll share the results. So it looks like, we won't go into them now, but trust everyone can see them. And, it looks like there's a pretty good mix across the board here. So with that, let me stop sharing and I'll end this poll. And I'll turn it over to Marcy to give us an overview of what GTFS is. Thank you.
Thank you, Al, and welcome everyone again to diving deep into GTFS. So general transit feed specification, a mouthful, and it takes your data from the left side of the screen where we have a printed schedule, maybe it's available on your website, to a trip plan. And that intermediate step will be a series of text files, these 12 text files. And today we're going to dive in deeply to any one of these to learn more about how that data from your agency generates a trip plan over here. The specification, when you want to read the exact language, like the Bible of GTFS, is a link here as well. So it's digitizing, standardizing your data so that we can offer trip plans between agencies and not just, gee, within my agency, how do I get from here to there? So if we do not have GTFS, if we do not publish GTFS, and I promise you there is a way to get from the Amtrak station to this campus at SIU, but if it's not published, you won't know it. At least I wouldn't know it, and it would be hard for me to think, well, which agency might be representing that part of the country when I need to get to visit my cousin who's at that campus. So we need to publish our data and not just generate the GTFS to meet an NTD report. The National Transit Map is an exciting opportunity for the United States to be able to say, what services do we have? And if that transit map includes all of the shapes, which we talked about in a prior recent webinar, the map will be accurate. If we decide that we don't have shapes, it'll look a little bit funny that it goes over land or over water, over grandma's house. So we want our data to be an accurate representation of our GTFS. And this portion of the slide is saying, we see there's GTFS available, but nobody is publishing it, so I can't get from here to there. The next slide talks about the concept on the left of what is data maintenance, and on the right, the deeper green is data quality. So try to keep that in mind. I don't have to read to you that routes relates to whether you have a route or not, but those are the text files that we're going to be addressing in this conversation today. We know that you come to, and some of you mentioned that you have other GTFS data managers. We want to be sure we're agnostic to that. We want you to have the resource that works for you, and National RTAP keeps a list if that would ever be helpful for you in a procurement possibility to contact these groups. Were you to choose the free tools that National RTAP has, we just need you to know how to get there. You come to our National RTAP page and the support page for GTFS. And you download our toolkit, you'll get a 50-page how-to manual and the Excel files to do that. So let's just take a very high-level question. Data maintenance would say, we have a bus stop right here at East Walnut and wherever, but as you can see, at least I hope you can see, that a person could literally be hit by a car if they were standing at the location specified. So data quality would say, we need to nudge that pin back to the side of the road so that the rider's standing where they need to stand. So hold that thought about data exists. It may pass a validator, but it could be a little safer, or maybe a lot safer. What happens? What is your data? How do we know what we're validating? So each of these text files gets zipped together, and then consumers of the data that are going to publish the data unzip that file and know what to expect in each of these text files. So while we're not going to unzip each file for you today, just hold that thought that that's how data is managed. And one error that sometimes happens is people compress the folder that has the files inside. That will not work. It fails. So we need you to only zip together the files that are a GTFS. And if you have a GTFS manager, they know how to do that. We want you to be aware that there are two validators out there. This one is the primary one used by FTA and others. And so you'll want to pass your file in front of this one, but there's another validator available and it catches some other data elements. We'd love there to be one, but at this point, for those of you who want to dial it up a little bit, you're aware there are two. The validation results from the mobility data validator come in three flavors: errors, warnings, and info. We'd like you to look through all of them, and just because it's not bright red error, you should look through, gee, should there be an expired calendar in my data set? What would that be coming from? Maybe it shouldn't be expired. I believe this is one of the only errors that you can ignore. So all other errors that are foreign key violations, something is inconsistent in your data, you will need to resolve. But this one is not going to cause your data to not be moving forward. So we brought it to your attention. Once you have your file and it is valid, you're going to want to host that file. Hosting to us means that you have a link, a permalink. We want you to get the idea in your mind that each time you update your file, don't tell us what day and time you did it. That changes the file name and the file link. We want one stable link to be available to your file, and that stable link will allow you to change the data behind it, but keep the link the same. And then anyone who comes to that link will always get the most recent data. So hold that thought. We'll review that a little bit more as needed. So no dates in the file name. We've recently noticed that sometimes the SSL certificate has expired. Well, who knew that that could be the problem? So try to make sure you're testing your URL. Don't have that as a problem. Maybe don't have a password because you'll have to issue that password to anyone and everyone. This really is public data. It's your digital version of the timetable that you'd put up in the laundromat. When you have hosting, you can host it at your website. That's completely fine. Or if you don't have an easy way to access that, it takes IT too long to publish a file and you want to stay on top of it, you can host with National RTAP. Anyone that's a US-based agency can, for free, get hosting, and that is one of the services we offer. And then once you have your link, you're going to issue it to the National Transit Database. We're going to talk about that in a few minutes, but you may also decide to share it with repositories so that you're not being asked, where's your most recent data? These libraries of data will have your data available. Okay. Before we pass it on to others, let me remind you that NTD, your National Transit Database, needs this permalink. And when you're on this page called the P50 and it's up there near the waffle, you'll see GTFS or General Transit Feed Specification. You're going to enter that permalink, and you're also going to unpack from your GTFS the agency ID. So if anyone has difficulty with that, we may need to talk about that separately, but ideally, if you're beginning to get familiar with what agency.txt would be, you'll find your agency ID in there. It might be the initials, it might be some number that's associated with your data. Well, you're going to see this more than once. The goal here today is to inspire you to own your data and test, test, test. Whatever methods you're going to use, you may have it in a trip planner, and that's the easiest way to test. You might have to open up these text files, but we can't be responsible for your data. You can. And now, with that in mind, we're going to pass it to Thomas, who's going to talk about the years of experience with Washington State managing GTFS.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Marcy. And thank you all for having me here today. I'm Thomas Craig. I'm the transportation planner at the Washington State Department of Transportation in the Public Transportation Division. I've worked with GTFS for a number of years, used to work for a private company helping agencies around the country maintain GTFS. Last few years, I managed a program here at Washington State DOT to have provide support to agencies in our state to maintain GTFS. And I've recently kind of shifted into really kind of being a data consumer, where I now work on transportation planning projects that use GTFS from agencies published in our state in order to understand the status of the transportation network in Washington. So I've seen a lot of different types of issues with GTFS and my 12 years of experience with this data. And I picked a few here to just highlight some of the issues that really can have a significant impact on your riders, but are also sometimes kind of easy to overlook. The first one of those, Marcy already touched on a little bit, but I wanted to really emphasize stop locations. Trip planners provide walking directions to exact stop locations, generally speaking. And so precision really matters when we're talking about where our stops are located in our GTFS data set. You can see on the image on the right side of the screen here that there's two agencies connecting here. One of the agencies has really placed their stop very precisely at the beginning of that blue line near the right side of the image, where the stop is right at a bus bay in a transit center. And another agency has placed their stop location in the middle of the administrative building. That's not where the bus actually stops. And so the rider in Google Maps is being offered walking directions that really don't represent what that rider needs to do in order to connect between those two buses. So that's one example of kind of how this can cause a real problem for your riders. Some common mistakes to watch out for. Especially in front of businesses, like if you have a stop in front of, a Walmart or another store in your town, it's easy sometimes to, because there's no intersection there to reference, to not place it precisely. So you want to, think, where exactly does that bus stop in front of the business? Sometimes stops are placed in the middle of the street, and as Marcy mentioned earlier, that can be a big safety issue. It might be the wrong side of the street. As in maybe the far side of the intersection instead of the near side, or vice versa, the center of building like we just saw, or just down the block. All of those, really matter. We want to be as precise as possible when locating those stops. The second issue has to do with fares. And sometimes when we hear about fares, agencies that offer a fare-free service think, oh, this doesn't apply to me. But it does. If you are a fare-free service, it's actually really important to have fares in your GTFS. You can see on the right side here some different options from Google Maps that show fares. You can see the fare in each of those sort of just above the word details in each of these three trip plans. So the top one has a fare of $2.80. The second one has a free fare, and it's marked free. The third agency is an agency here in Washington State that has fare-free service and could be telling their riders about that, but that information is missing from their GTFS. So riders don't know when looking this up in trip planning apps that the service is free. And then we have on the left side of the screen a view of what this looks like inside GTFS builder, when you're managing your GTFS, you can create a fare attribute that has a price of 0.00 or just 0, and that instructs Google and other trip planners that that is a free trip, not just that there's no fare information. I think we can go on to the next slide. Finally, this is a general issue that really touches on potentially anything in your GTFS. But basically, the lesson here is that consistency is key. One should be thinking about their GTFS as totally in alignment with their website, with the information on vehicles, signs, also any maybe printed material, your bus book. This applies to really all attributes in your GTFS. So it could be your route names and numbers, your stop names, stop numbers, head signs, the times of service, the agency name, your route colors. What's most important is not that you choose whether to have your stop names have an and in between the two streets or an ampersand in between the two streets. What's really important is just that it's the same everywhere. You want to be providing really consistent information to your riders so that they can see the same exact text in Bing Maps and the Transit app and Google Maps as they see when they look at your website and what they see on the bus stop sign if the stop name is printed there. So when in doubt, really shoot for consistency in your GTFS across or in comparison to your other sources of customer information. Those are the three issues that, or kind of common GTFS mistakes that I wanted to point out here today. And thank you all for taking the time to learn about GTFS. I'll pass it back to Marcy.
Well, actually, we're moving on to Evan. And Evan's joining us from California. Take it away.
Yeah, thank you so much. My name is Evan Soroki. I lead the Transit Data Quality Branch at Caltrans. And I'm going to talk a little bit about holiday service GTFS quality, which is very relevant at this moment in time. So we did some research back in 2023 holiday season and found that over 95% of agencies had some kind of holiday schedule that was a deviation from their regular schedule. But at the time, 70% of the trans agencies had at least one data quality issue related to holiday data quality. And so I'm going to talk a little bit more about how, building off of what Thomas said, let's get your website matching your GTFS. So when we do our research and analysis on the data quality for holidays, we look at somewhere, anywhere on the trans agency's website to see if there's information about holidays. And so even having just a little paragraph describing what's going to happen on the holidays, which is ideally valid for the next 6 to 12 months, is critical here. And even if no holidays are observed, there are some sort of 24/7 operations. It's important to explicitly note that as well. And then when creating a GTFS, if we can go to the next slide here, for most transit agencies, especially if you're using the GTFS builder in the raw, this means filling out the calendar dates.txt file. And so the most sort of common thing is you should be adding information about the holidays within the calendar dates file, and it should match whatever is described on the transit agency website. And so let's go further to sort of some next slide. So sort of talk about some implications of that. And so as we all know, or probably know, Thanksgiving is the 4th or last Thursday of November. And so that's consistent, but we have sometimes some specific dates of holidays. So December 25th is a very, very common holiday observed by transit agencies, and that can be on a different day. And here's a good example. So July 2026, we have July 4th. Lots of transit agencies have different kinds of service, but it falls on a Saturday. And so what does this mean? Does it mean that the transit agency is just doing its regular weekend service? Does it mean there's some observation of the holiday on Friday, it's going to be different probably between a lot of different agencies. And so it's really important to understand your own agency's operations and properly add that in the data. So sort of on the next slide, we can see sort of an example of, one of the other sort of ways to represent this. So in a lot of trans agencies, sometimes they may just completely remove their regular service from their schedule in the calendar dates. So this would be, let's say December 25th is, I forget what day of the week, it's a weekday this year. And so for a trans agency that would simply not operate, they would just add an entry with exception type 2 that indicates their regular service is not operated on this date. However, some agencies may say we do operate, but on our weekend schedule on some of these dates. And so a use case to represent that would be to still put an entry to cancel the regular service, but then add in the weekend schedule for a certain date. And then beyond that, there are some even more advanced use cases where some agencies may have only some routes that operate on the holiday, or there's even like, the special holiday schedule just for the holidays. And yeah, I encourage you all to, go to either office hours or talk with your vendor about how to represent that in your schedule building tool of choice.
Thank you so much, Evan. We are going to jump into another poll, and I think what Evan's also saying is no more footnotes. I don't want to read about a footnote standing on the corner that some day after Easter is a holiday. And I wouldn't know that until the bus never comes. So help us out, make sure that your GTFS, as Thomas and Evan were saying, is consistent with your materials. So in this poll, it's, go ahead, Al.
Oh yeah, let me, so we'd really love to hear from you. What are one or two data quality issues that you've had or that you've experienced or that you have questions on? And we won't read through these today, but this information we collect will really help us tailor resources, for future. And we hope to answer it though today. We'll say, but this information that we're collecting will really help us, for future resources.
I don't think we're getting a lot of traction here, Al. Everybody hopefully is not too overwhelmed, but maybe they have no issues yet, which is also okay.
A quick reminder, the chat is there. If you have any questions or if you want us to slow down or repeat some, please, or clarify something, please, take advantage of that. And we're here to answer your questions. So thank you.
It's going to get going a little faster, everyone.
Yeah.
So
so
put on your seatbelts and maybe your spelunking headgear, because we realize there's a lot to cover and more. This is more of a resource for you. So just open your mind to the possibility that when you're ready to explore any of these topics, you come back and start looking at the checklist. Don't make notes. Know that this is here for you. So you'll be unpacking the zip file, unless there's some other way that you can view it in the tools that you have. And you could look at it in a notepad if you wanted to use our Excel workbook to unpack whatever version of GTFS you have. You'll then be able to see it in rows and columns. And we're reminding you that you are responsible for your GTFS when you and your agency check the box that you are the data owner. You're saying that the data is accurate. So let's dive in a little bit more on stops. I'll try not to repeat, but when we think about data maintenance, you might just be looking and say, gee, my agency should have 200 bus stops or 20. Is that number in the right range? On the other side, for data quality, you might say, wow, we may have a lot of non-time points that we go to. Are they represented? So these shared stops between agencies, work with your adjacent agency, as Thomas mentioned, and try to put that bus stop in the same location. Are the stops ADA accessible? We'll look at that. Here are examples of data that's published right now. Would I have any idea where to stand? Do I really run to this side of the road or that side of the road? Or, it looks silly. You'd think this is a mistake, and honestly, it could be better. In our last webinar, we talked about shapes, and in order to get good shapes, you have to have good stops. And so you have a video of that available, in our resources for webinars at National RTAP to think about it. Does that rider just stand in the middle of the parking lot on a hot day and hope the bus comes by? Do they stand over here? And as Thomas said, do they stand by the building looking for the bus? We can be a little more precise. At National RTAP, we use My Maps. You can just start mapping your stops, look at them, make edits, and then return it to the stops.txt file in order to dial up precision. Sadly, but true, there are bus stops located in the ocean. So the National Transit Map is asking us to please no longer generate a GTFS where the location is at least not on land if it's in the ocean. I mean, we may have docks for some of our ferries, but this is real data and should not be there. There may be stops that you have in your data set that have no service, or it might be an example where that stop hasn't been assigned to any of the routes. So again, you're looking through some of this validation data and you're saying, oh, that's right, we put that bus stop back in service, or we're never going to go there again. So you might be able to take that out. And there is a little lag when you're using Google Maps for trip planning, where it could take a month for that bus stop icon to flip off of the map. This is a discussion or an advisory for you to see that ADA accessibility is located here for this bus stop, but not for this bus stop. It's not that the ferry can't allow someone on, but that the bus stop at this location hasn't yet been marked with a yes for accessibility, which is a number 1 in the stops.txt. If there is one stop for multiple routes, you might just have that one stop served in your GTFS for all of those routes. The validator will accept you putting in a shotgun group of bus stops. We would encourage you to have one stop, and then the rider gets to see a range of departures for a range of services. All those routes and trips are coming out of that one location, so they don't have to go, gee, is it the 2 or the 7 or the 9 that I'm looking for? Thank you, Evan. He gave us an opportunity to see a transit center. And in the transit center, you can have multiple bays, and then the rider knows if they're coming in here and they have to go there, exactly what that trajectory is, where they have to go between those stops. It's a little different than what Thomas was talking about, where it was incorrectly located. This is breaking apart one of your transit centers into parent station, child station, so that the rider knows exactly where to stand. Thank you, Evan. Our next topic is agency. Should be so straightforward, shouldn't even be a question, but you'll be surprised. The piece of the puzzle that I'd like you to think about if you're in a regional data set is that the agency ID represents you, and then the agency ID represents the other agencies that are in that shared data set. So let's look a little more deeply. The validator on this one data set that I pulled said there are no agencies. Well, that means they did not fill in agency ID in their GTFS. It's not to say they don't have a file, but we should not, and you should not see any zeros for agency. You're going to be pulling that agency ID out of your agency.txt file and putting it into the P50, and that will be who's funding that particular service. And you also will use agency ID in fares, so it should not be blank. Unfortunately, I don't know how many of you have been around long enough to know that Ride Systems was a company that provided GTFS and in services, and they are no longer in business. If I dial this phone number, I get the doo-doo-doo, the number you have dialed is out of service. You need to look at this. This is not a deep dive into your data. This is within the validator that blah, blah agency still has someone's URL to their agency from a company who was managing it. So I know that might be a little confusing right now, but we're asking you to look at the data that comes through the validator with a little more than, gee, it exists, I don't see any errors. So You could also include an email that allows somebody to send you a message with praise or a question. The other place that we manage agency information used to be optional, and we would encourage you very much to fill in feed info. So this one is, who is the agency? And this is, how would I reach you as the data manager? So I'd like to be able to say, NA is not acceptable anymore. Yes, it is a GTFS, but who will I contact? And we would be filling in these cells with an email for someone that should be available to answer questions about the data. I'm wondering if they really know that for the next 10 years, this data is going to be valid. So you might encourage the team that works on GTFS to keep it to 2 to 3 years, not 10 to 20. The calendar.txt file also looks at when this data will be valid. We'd like to at least have 30 days, and I think it was Thomas that said at least 6 to 12 months into the future. So you'll want to have a current data set, future data set merged together in order to generate a trip plan so that riders will know you're adding a stop, you're removing a route, whatever that future will bring. If the data is not up to date, often the rider will see we don't have recent timetables. Sometimes that affects everyone on the list. We're all being marked by someone who isn't keeping their data up to date, and we can do better. Within calendar, text, and feed info, we'll just make one more comment here that you'll see some of this similar data, and they should possibly be the same. Now let's go to trips. Trips are telling me, what day of the week, when I'm going to apply those holidays to this data. And we also want to know what direction. In theory, what's the head sign going to say? We know head signs can change, but is this going to the Walmart or back to the transit center? Well, in this data set, nothing is in there. So we can do better and put something into trip head sign, direction ID. Direction ID allows the data consumers to split that trip, saying inbound, outbound, or that it's a loop. And so we've got some data details down here on how to fill that out. And riders who are needing mobility support should find out if that vehicle is wheelchair accessible. This isn't about the bus stop now. This is about you're driving a vehicle that has the lift. So most likely it's going to be a 1. And then for bikes allowed, you could allow somebody to bring the bike into the bus if that works, or you have a bike rack. But if you don't allow wheelchairs on that particular route, tell me, and then I'll find another way to get there if I need a mobility assist like that. So that's how TRIPS brings better information to riders. Within the Mechatran validator, you would be able to see duplicated trips, and that's not in the other validator right now. Routes should be simple. You have many routes or 3 routes, whatever you have. As we were talking, they need to be consistent. If you have a route short name, maybe 5, 6 characters, blue 8, 222, you'll put that in. If you want to show blue 7 or 7 blue, and maybe you're starting to go over the 6, 7 character spacing, you'll want to have 1 route long name and omit the short name. We're finding in some of our review at NTD that people are not even putting in the right match, the right value for whether it's a bus or a streetcar or a alternate. Number 3 is going to say bus. That's the majority, I think, who are on this call today. If you need to find out about different other types of modes, you'll find that here. And this is for ferry boat. There might be a ferry bus. I'm finding that hard to read. I know I'm getting a little older. I might be a little more persnickety, but if you make this even smaller, it gets even harder for me to read. And the contrast, we can have a contrast checker here for you to say, I'm not sure, but somebody on the internet knows whether a white or black set of text would work better. And we want to be sure that if you publish a URL back to your routes, that it's up to date. Shapes. Shapes are going to match our data to the road in which it's going to take a path. If you don't have shapes, on occasion, it will just snap, stop to stop, be a straight line. Does that really harm the rider? No, but it might confuse them. And if it goes over their grandmother's backyard or into, water where there's no bridge, it might actually confuse them. So let's work on improving what shapes are, which is going to snap to the road. And I mentioned, but we did just have a webinar on that, and we have resources and guidebooks and how-tos on how to build shapes. And once we have this snapping to the road, we want to be sure the bus stop is on the correct side of the road. I think Thomas mentioned that. And we get a chance to really view our data once we have a shapes file available. So this number should not be 0. That would mean there are no shapes associated with this data set. I am finding in a few cases that people don't assign the shape to the trip. So I have shapes, I have trips. I haven't put them together, and no one will know how to assign them. It's your data. So make sure you're assigning the shape to the trip. I think Thomas also said, let's bring it to the front door of the landscape, of the pharmacy, wherever it's going to be, or the clinic door. Do I stand at the road or at the door? Sometimes you can get under that canopy, sometimes you can't. We understand it's your data. We just want the rider to be standing in the right place for the driver and the operator to find them. This is now required. If you asked me a year ago, I would have said nice to have, but not required for NTD. Take this up as a new charge and it will improve your data quality quite a bit. So we'll talk a little bit more about shapes and precision. We can put the line as shown here in the center. We don't have to draw it inbound, outbound, both sides of the road. So this cleanly displays your data. This idea of spikes, there might be a feature in your GTFS toolkit from the vendor that you have to say, don't export the spikes. And that would be nice. Is that required? More in the best practices. This is on the better data quality, but not house on fire. And when we talk about a stop location, the pin for the stop, whatever number this is within 50 meters of each stop. So we don't want this point to be way over here and not associated with this stop. It might cause a little zigzag. Okay, we talked quite a bit right now, Al, about GTFS, and the audience will say.
Yeah, so today, just a quick polling question, now that we've covered this, do you feel comfortable working on GTFS and using, creating quality GTFS data? Today's webinar was really intended to be high level, give you an overview of everything. We're hoping this webinar and this presentation deck will serve as a resource moving forward. And, now it's time to kind of slow things down a little bit too. And we're here to, answer questions. And we went through a few of those options earlier, from office hours, GTFS office hours, to the conference, to emails. We're really here. So from this poll, looks like 44% are comfortable with GTFS, 17% no, and then there's a contingency that's ask me in a month. And so those are the folks that are gonna get some support from Marcy moving forward. So let me end this poll.
Or Cal ITP
or Cal ITP,
exactly, or their local. So
or
do you
your
want to
local
share those
DOT.
results with us, Al? You're seeing
Yep,
them.
let me share them.
Fantastic.
Here you go.
Thank you.
And Cal ITP, Evan, if I don't know if you've done this already. I know you pasted a link in there, but a link to your Cal ITP resources too. If there's California agencies on the call, that would be helpful.
I think it's in our conclusion slide that we know how to reach Thomas and Al. I mean, Thomas and Evan for any additional questions.
But thank you for filling out the poll. Again, that really helps us, and it helps us understand what your needs are moving forward. So maybe next slide, I can maybe go over a couple of the things, or we can maybe go over these together, Marcy. But we mentioned a few times now, here's information on the office hours that Marcy's available for, and really drop in, no registration needed. There's a link right there, and it's also on our calendar, the RTAP calendar on our website. And, it's a great resource. And then also some of the NCAT, some of the this information came from an NCAT recent publication where they had a checklist for data quality issues. And so that's another resource. And there's a link on here. And when this presentation is made available, you'll be able to access it directly from here. And then here, I'll turn this over to you. We're going to touch on GTFS real-time and GTFS Flex here. Something that we're going to start doing more and more of that now.
Thank you, Al. Without GTFS, you can't proceed to GTFS real time. Think in your mind, we're trying to find out where that bus is right now, heading toward a bus stop. If the bus stop's on the wrong side of the street, if the bus stop doesn't exist at all, it's very difficult to match the real-time display with the scheduled display and tell me whether the bus is running late or early. With regard to GTFS Flex, that is a new specification. We're thrilled that it's been adopted. At this moment, we don't have as many trip planners that are publishing the data for free. There are ways to get the data published. We just have to pony up and make sure that in your region or for your agency, you want to make that investment. But that's an important piece of what we have going for us right now. And we're excited that GTFS Flex will finally represent the hundreds of agencies that really provide a backbone of transportation services. It just doesn't fit into a routing as we have with fixed. So remember I said I would repeat this, that everyone, including you, are going to be testing your data, taking this back into small pieces at the pace that you can to review and make sure that your data is the best that it can be. So we could try to do a validation demonstration, or we could wait and do that one-on-one or as a group in our Thursday office hours. Do we want to come back to you and say, hey, let's have a quarterly or twice a year meetup on data quality versus data maintenance? So Al, you'll help us wrap up what our upcoming opportunities are for National RTAP?
Yeah, and again, here's a link to the National RTAP conference. It's December 7th through 10th. It's really we're calling it's a training really, and there's going to be opportunities for training on GTFS and the other RTAP tools, in addition to many other sessions. There's a link to learn more about it. The Wrangling Access, Mobility, and Rural and Tribal Transit. And it's in Austin. Great. It's going to be a great event. We're really excited about it. And then just a couple of other things here. TACKLE, which is the FTA Technical Assistance Library. We'll be meeting again in February. That's a ways off, so we'll remind you again if you're interested. And then Website Builder, another tool that we support here at National RTAP. We also have regular office hours too on Tuesdays. So if you're interested in that, or if you need a website, that's a great resource to take advantage of. And then here's our contact information, myself, Marcy, Evans, and Thomas's. Please reach out if you have questions. And this is really important. Where Marcy's pointing to is the QR code. I'm actually going to put a link to the survey in the chat also, but please take a minute to fill this out. This information, we report this information to FTA, and it really helps us improve our webinars and resources moving forward. That's a little survey on today's webinar. And then that's all I have. Do we want to take some questions then, Marcy?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Or Thomas and Evan will help me too. I wasn't able to monitor the chat as closely. Do we think there are other topics in here that didn't settle in for someone?
So I did answer 2 questions that came up in the Q&A. We had a question about stop locations and whether it makes sense to put those stops at the shelter or on the sidewalk. And I answered there, that's a really great question and indicates that you're thinking about this at the right level of detail. So thank you so much. They both seem defensible to me. The shelter is Okay. My personal preference is right on top of the stop sign. That's kind of what I aim for when I'm thinking about it. But you should provide the information that's going to work for your customers. So if you think that the shelter is the right answer because of how your system is formulated, that makes sense. A shelter is where a rider is going to wait. Then we had a second question about setting up the Google Transit Partner dashboard and how that is taking a long time. And the question was, is this delay typical for the initial setup, or should we expect similar delays when our GTFS permalink is updated? And I explained there that delay should only happen at that setup stage. There is a process to go through Google validation and get that partner dashboard set up. Once you're through that process, once you've gone through the preview stage and your data is live in Google Maps, when you update your GTFS, it should flow through to Google Maps in about 24 hours, usually, or less. I'll add one more thing that I didn't put in the text answer there, which is the Google dashboard allows you a couple of options, either to set up a scheduled fetch for your data, where Google is going to automatically grab your data on a certain frequency, or it allows you to click a button and send it direct to Google. If you choose the option to click a button, send it to Google in the dashboard, it should take 24 hours or less, usually, to go live. If you set up if you tell Google to fetch it on a recurring basis, remember that if, for example, if you select once a week, then it may take a week for your data to get into Google Maps because it's going to wait until that's scheduled to fetch. So that gets into the nitty gritty and maybe something you want to review with Marcy on an office hours. But generally speaking, no, you don't need to wait a long time after you're in Google.
And Thomas, where you and I used to watch data take days to publish, I'm now noticing it is within 8 hours. So you
that's great.
Go to sleep and put your file up, and you should the next morning, by midday, see that file launched. And now it seems like all the trip planners are vying for who can be faster at publishing your data in a timely way, because to them, that's their bread and butter. That if the data is accurate, the rider is going to trust this trip planner over another one. But it relies on you as the the GTFS manager, that you give them the best chance. So let's do all we can to make everyone successful, and then riders have confidence when they're planning trips. So excellent questions. Thank you, Thomas, for leading that charge. And I am available to help you walk through the Google situation. There is occasions where they're a little too finicky, and I can help say that's optional. We don't need that right now, and move us forward. But if there is a data issue, let's resolve it and also move forward. So thank you for that. It wasn't as much today's conversation, but we can talk about it anytime. Do we think there are any other questions that have come up? Some people would like to set up a time to go through details. That's why we're here. We could do it at a Thursday meeting, and then all of us learn together. That's the idea of the office hours.
Yeah.
So those of you who thought we couldn't get through 60 slides in an hour, look at us. We've got time to
Did
spare.
it. Yeah. And we will be making we need to, tomorrow, or I guess Friday at the latest, the presentation will be available online along with the webinar recording. And, again, we're really hoping that this will serve as a resource moving forward. So the intention today was to cover a lot and kind of throw a lot, sort of a comprehensive list of the issues, the data quality issues, but really now's the time to step back and really try to make sure everyone understands it.
Fantastic. You stayed with us for this amount of information. Like anything, data can be more or less precise, and it relies on you to care enough about your data. And just as Thomas said, is it at the shelter or at the pole? We don't have a guaranteed answer on everything that it must be this, but try to think about where's that bus operator going to be looking for someone? Deep into the shelter, closer to the street? We don't want somebody getting blown by the bus because we said we think it's here, but really where they should be standing is more visible in a certain location. If they are
Yeah.
on an assistive device, they may actually be hearing that instruction of where to stand. And so if they're like behind the shelter somehow in terms of where they're indicated to stand, maybe the bus operator thinks they're just taking a little break and they don't need the bus right now. So
Yeah.
think about it from the rider perspective, and then you can always make edits. This is not once and done, that's for sure.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, because it's, there's the reporting aspect of it, but it really comes down to the rider and making sure they have the best experience possible riding transit, and data quality is really key to that.
Fantastic. Well,
Well,
we
thank
can
you,
open it
everyone,
up or
and I'll
listen
let
to
you.
more questions
Yeah.
if there might be any, but if we didn't frustrate you that there's so much to cover, we really appreciate you staying with us for the hour. You'll hear me on some of the videos. I'll do my best to answer questions that weren't clear. If you watched a video on training or one of our webinars, to come back and make sure it's crystal clear in your mind how to manage your data going forward.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Marcy, and Evan and Thomas for helping out with this webinar, and GTFS, the work we do together with GTFS. So, all right. Well, thank you, everyone.
Thank you all.
Thanks all.
Thank you. Bye now.